CEJA builds the power of communities of color to advance environmentally and socially just policies in California. We do this by engaging voters of communities of color, and actually this year for the first time we just launched our civic engagement program and put up our first voter guide. And so the voter guide is over there. We also have voter registration forms if anybody wants to pick up some or register themselves to vote. And we do advocacy to advance critical policies that will improve the health and quality of life in communities of color. So the goal for today's event is we really wanted to just give everybody the landscape of critical ballot initiative measures that are important to California. A few housekeeping things. So we do have somebody that is interpreting for us, so just to keep that in mind. And we are streaming this live. So we are a coalition, a statewide coalition, and a lot of our folks aren't able to join us, but they're probably joining us as we speak here. So just keep that in mind that we are putting this on Facebook Live, and the restrooms are right over there. So we're not going to go over all of the ballot initiative measures, but just the most really important ones. And before we dive into them, I wanted to introduce our speakers, and thank you so much for coming out tonight to be with us. So Christina Arube is a veteran political strategist and manager with the Ballot Initiative Strategy Center for BISC. She's the California State Director. In that role, Christina leads this effort to bring a diverse range of organizations and leaders together to forge new civic engagement strategies around ballot measures in California. Christina has nearly 20 years of experience in every aspect of the civic engagement field. Suzanne Jimenez is the Deputy Political Director at the Service Employees International Union, SEIU, United Healthcare Workers, so SEIU UHW. It's one of the largest unions of hospital workers in the Western United States with 90,000 members, and their members are frontline caregivers, including respiratory care practitioners, dietary, environmental services, and nursing staff who keep Californians healthy. Their mission is to provide quality care for all patients, expand access to excellent, affordable health care for all Californians, and improve living standards for all workers. Dan Jacobson directs the policy development, research, and legislative advocacy for Environment California. He's based in Sacramento, and he leads the organization's policy agenda and advocates before the state legislature, the administration, and Congress. He's been with the organization for 28 years. And then Orayu Amoni, political director for UTLA, has been in labor for 7 years and has worked in the political arena for about 13 years. Orayu was a LA native born in MLK, in the MLK hospital in Watts. And Orayu's parents are both immigrants from Nigeria and Mexico, respectively. He's a first generation Los Angeles Angelino and US citizen. So welcome to all of our speakers. All right. And so the first speaker that we're going to bring up is Christina Arube of the Ballot Initiative Strategy Center, and she's going to focus on Prop 57, the Public Safety and Rehabilitation Ballot Initiative, and then Props 62 and 66, which are the death penalty ballot initiatives.
I'm not a native Angelino. I live in Oakland, which is why I always get the timing on traffic incorrect. When I'm down here, I always think, 30 minutes, and no, it's an hour. But it's great to be here. And as Strella said, I'm Christina Uribe with the Ballot Initiative Strategy Center. And so I'm going to talk about the three criminal justice and death penalty related measures. I don't work for the campaign, so I would like to say that disclaimer. But we do work closely, as Strella mentioned in her intro, with a lot of diverse organizations across the state, and really try to work with organizations across issue and across ballot measure, in part because that's how voters relate, right? They're a member of a union and engaged in their local environmental community organization, or working on school or prison pipeline issues, as well as really concerned about how all these different things impact them. So we try to take that approach to think about community and constituency, versus individual issue and campaign, and try and play that role to bring together all these different organizations. So I am going to focus on the criminal justice measure, which I thought was interesting because often I talk about education measures because I spent 7 years working for the National Education Association. And when I was thinking about Prop 57 and why we should care, oh, right, sorry, thank you. I'm a fast, loud talker. It runs in my family, thank you. So Prop 57, which is the Public Safety and Rehabilitation Act, as I was thinking about my education background and this in particular, for those of us who do work on issues around school to prison pipeline, this is something that's really directly related to that when we think about the overcrowding of our prisons, and then the majority of people who are our prison system are people of color, primarily Latinos and African Americans, and increasingly Latinas and African American women. So this measure in particular is important for those of us who care about those communities. It really focuses on several things. One, it does keep dangerous criminals off our streets, really focusing on the violent offenders versus non-violent offenders in the system, saving tax dollars by really reducing the type of spending that we have going into the prison system. My shirt I wore today is from the California Endowment, which is doing a School Not Prisons tour. So it's very fitting when we think about how we spend our money in California, and this act really focusing on the rehabilitation side, allowing parole considerations for non-violent. Really like to stress that, because whenever we're talking about criminal justice reform, there's a lot of scare tactics that the other side uses, so it's really important to remember this allows parole considerations for non-violent offenders when they complete their primary term for their primary offense, versus often what you get is a lot of enhancements after someone's already served that primary offense. So this allows for parole considerations once they've served that term. It also allows for a system of credits that can be earned towards rehabilitation that include behavior and education milestones that they may achieve to again get someone more eligible for parole. And again, this puts the focus on rehabilitation, which right now resources are not spent on that part of the system. And we know without those kind of services, people are more likely to reoffend. So again, it puts an emphasis on the rehabilitation of non-violent offenders. And the last thing I just want to say about this that's I think one of the most appealing and important parts of the initiative is as it relates to juvenile offenders, it requires judges instead of prosecutors to make the call to decide when minors should be prosecuted as adults. It really shifts the focus again on rehabilitation and what's in the best interest of this minor versus from a prosecutorial side, and really putting an emphasis on convictions and terms, and again classifying minors as an adult. So this shifts back to what existed, that judgment to judges actually within the system. And then the last thing I'll just say about one more reason about why we need this, I think a lot of us know this because of a lot of good work community activists have been doing on this, which is our spending on prison system over the last several decades has increased by about 500%. So thinking about not only the size of the system, but the dollars that go into it that take away from education and health and human services and a lot of social safety net issues that we've seen be cut from the state budget in recent years. This addresses the fact that the U.S. Supreme Court recently ruled that California actually has to reduce its prison population. We're in violation of many rules, and without something in place, a policy in place that helps inform who gets paroled, it really just leaves it potentially actually paroling violent offenders versus again putting the shift back on non-violent offenders and thinking about rehabilitation, and again not adding juveniles to the adult prison population. So that's a little bit about 57. I'm going to then shift to the more extreme side of the criminal justice system and talk about the 2 death penalty measures, and then I think we'll have someone else, and then we can clarify if there's a term or something I use that people want to know more about. So, and then I actually should just add that the last thing about 57, it really builds off Prop 47, which some people may remember Californians passed overwhelmingly, that started to look at again, fixing things like 3 strikes and real criminal justice reform, and giving people the opportunity to kind of re-enter society and reclassify some things that were felonies that, again, non-violent, that really were reclassified as misdemeanors, thinking about, again, how we integrate people back into our community so they can be employed and finish their education. So 2 other measures that are on the ballot, there are 17, but 2 others that are really tied together are yes, well, I say yes on 62, and no on 66, which I know is the positions that has taken, but 62 is pretty straightforward. It is, from my perspective, fairly simple. It would replace the death penalty, would repeal the death penalty in California, and replace it with life in prison without parole. California hasn't executed anyone in over a decade, in part because of court rulings about how we do that. And so 62 really simplifies the process, guarantees, again, that the most violent criminals won't be released, but they will, again, have life without parole. And it really is the only way that we can guarantee that California never executes an innocent person. That's really the only way. I was on a panel 2 weeks ago with a gentleman who was wrongly accused and convicted at the age of 18 and was released at the age of 58. He was 3 weeks away. He was on death penalty, on death row. He was 3 weeks away from his execution. And luckily, thanks to the great work of organizations like the Witness Project and the Innocence Project, he was exonerated. But 39 years of his life, literally 18 to 58. And so thinking about those stories, the only way to guarantee that doesn't happen is by repealing the death penalty and putting a system in place that guarantees, again, that those most violent the criminals remain in prison, but that we don't execute someone innocent in the process. 66, which Anessa has a no position on, as do I think most of the organizations that are here today, actually is a complicated mess. So it was put on the ballot actually in response to the 62 being put on. This was put on to confuse voters. It's very confusing. It's poorly written. It's actually will increase the risk that someone innocent will be executed. And this is something that will keep the death penalty in place. Add a few more layers of bureaucracy to the process. The proponents are saying that it will speed it up. And they're using that as a key reason to support the measure, but it actually won't speed it up because it'll add a lot more layers to the process. And what we really need is to reform the process as it relates to the death penalty and repeal it. This, again, is what we consider a reckless experiment that really risks innocent lives. And again, thinking about, when you think about who's on death row and who has been exonerated after being wrongly convicted, the majority of those folks are Black and Latino males. And more than 150 people who have been wrongfully sentenced to death because of laws similar to 66 in other states have since been exonerated. But think about that number, 150 people who were wrongly convicted and were sitting on death row. And so 66 would remove those safeguards that currently exist to prevent, even though there's not a 100% guarantee, to prevent someone innocent from being executed. And the last thing I'll just say is, in California, especially in Southern California, LA County, Riverside County, San Bernardino, and Orange make up the majority. This is where the majority of capital crime cases come, and death penalty cases. So the majority of folks sitting on death row are from those Southern California counties. And again, 66 is intended to confuse voters about the death penalty, and not only would keep it in place, but would run the risk that someone innocent could be executed. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Christina. So next we're going to have Orayu Amomi talk about Prop 55, which is the Prop 30 extension to fund education, and then Prop 58, which is the Learn Initiative. And if folks need a voter guide, we have some voter guides over there on the table.
Thank you for having me. My name is Orayu Amomi. I'm the political director with United Teachers Los Angeles. We represent about 35,000 educators within LAUSD. Actually, all of the educators within LAUSD are part of our bargaining unit. Before I go on to 55 58, I just want to say, I don't know if anyone's checked out 13 on Netflix, but it's a really good movie talking about how the prison industrial complex is used to oppress specifically Black and Latino males, and it has been used historically to do that. So you all should check it out. 55, it's a no-brainer, really. Everyone should vote yes on 55. How many people here make over $250,000 a year? Okay. This will not in any way affect you at all. How many people in here have a loved one or know someone that is either in the K-12 public education system or attending a community college? 55 will benefit all of them. Okay, so this is not a tax increase in any way. It's a continuation or an extension of our current taxes for the top 2% of income earners, meaning if you make $250,000 a year or more. The other side, which is not really an organized other side, but there are some criticisms of, taxing wealthy individuals, right? That somehow jobs are going to flee the state, that, our economic engine won't operate efficiently. In 2013 and 2014, California increased their job market by more than any other state in the nation. So this is after the extensions or these tax increases were put in place, and we grew our economy by 325,000 jobs in 2013 and 2014 alone. So this idea that somehow taxing rich people, we get to lose our jobs, I think is a false narrative that we need to be careful of and mindful of. So 55 is not a tax increase. It extends the current tax structures for the top 2% of income earners for an additional 12 years. It's not permanent. And it funds K-12, community college, and some health care. All things that are necessary for the survival of our species, for lack of a better phrase. So I'll leave it there with 55. I mean, really, if there's nothing else you vote on the ballot, I mean, I would say there are a couple of things you should vote on the ballot. 55, yes, absolutely. 58. 58 does two things. One, it makes it so that someone who is not a non-native English speaker can learn English quicker, right? When I was I don't mean to date myself, but I graduated college in 1999, which is a long time ago, and I started college in 1994. And at the time, we didn't have Prop 227, right? So folks could learn. If you weren't a native English speaker, you would come into a school, a public school, and we would teach you math in your primary language. After 1998, that was no longer the case. So that doesn't make any sense, right? Why would we not teach you mathematics, science, history in your primary language at the same time that we're teaching you English, right? We all know that if we do that, you're going to learn English quicker. So these ideas around language are mostly anti-immigrant sentiments that we have, and as we continue on this pathway around diversity for our state and inclusion, we need to get rid of all of these laws. They make no sense. In addition to helping non-native English speakers, Prop 58 also gives or expands the opportunities for native English speakers to learn a second language, which is important, right? I'm fortunate enough to get the opportunity to travel around the world, and you go to Brazil and everybody speaks 8 different languages. And And it's crazy, right? As was mentioned earlier, my father is Nigerian. I was in Brazil maybe 2 years ago. And I met somebody and they were speaking to me in Yoruba. And I was completely ashamed because I don't speak Yoruba, right? And here it is another person who doesn't have any real connection to Nigeria in any way, speaking the language that I should be speaking. So we need to expand how we teach language in our public schools, and we need to make sure that we are not pushing anti-immigrant sentiments as part of that pedagogy. So vote yes on 55 and 58 if you are interested in public education and making California more diverse and inclusive. Thank you.
Okay, we were going to pause to take some questions, but since it's a small group, we're just going to go straight through and then we'll do all the Q&A at the very end. So I'm going to bring up Suzanne Jimenez, who I mentioned earlier is the Deputy Political Director of SEIU, United Healthcare Workers, and she's going to talk about Prop 56, the tobacco tax increase.
Thank you, Strella. Hi, everybody. How's everybody doing? Excited to hear about Prop 56? Yeah. Okay, so, is it a shock that folks, we're still talking about tobacco and how it's killing people and how, exactly, I see you in the front, so it continues to kill about 40,000 people a year. Smoking, just tobacco-related diseases are killing 40,000 Californians a year. And it's actually costing taxpayers $3.5 billion a year here in the state of California. And this is all preventable diseases, right? Things that you don't have to get if you're not smoking. And so Prop 56 actually would increase the tobacco tax on tobacco products, so cigarettes and e-cigarettes. And the good thing about the proposition is if you don't smoke, you don't pay for it. So that's a great thing, right? If you are a smoker and you are causing your own illnesses, you have to pay towards the system that is actually kind of subsidizing your health care. And so, I want to talk a little bit about how actually the tobacco industry has been really being predators or have really focused on our communities, on Latino and African American communities primarily. They have had a series of aggressive campaigns towards communities of color. They go into communities of color. They, I don't know if folks know, but menthol cigarettes, that's kind of the gateway cigarette or tobacco product for many people. And did folks know that menthol cigarettes are actually cheaper in communities of color? You can buy menthol cigarettes cheaper in a community of color, predominantly in Latino and African American communities. And this is the way that they are trying to get in our community hooked on cigarettes. And so 90% of people that smoke now started when they were teenagers. And so the tobacco industry, what they're really doing is they're trying to get to our kids and get them hooked young so that they have lifelong consumers for the rest of their life that are purchasing cigarettes. And so what we have found in other states is when you significantly raise the tobacco tax, you see a significant decrease in actual people smoking. And so overall that's, improves the health of the individual themselves, but also that state. And so what does this revenue actually bring? So a big part of the revenue that is generated from the tobacco tax, 82% would go to Medi-Cal. And for folks that may or may not know, but Medi-Cal is now the largest insurance provider in the state of California. So a third of Californians are insured by Medi-Cal. And this is really all due to the great work of the Affordable Care Act. We expanded Medi-Cal access to lower income adults. And so now we have a third of Californians that are covered by Medi-Cal. Included in that is about 50% of California's children are covered by Medi-Cal. About 50% of Latinos in the state of California are covered by Medi-Cal. About a quarter of African Americans are covered by Medi-Cal, and it is a system that is severely underfunded. And so the revenue that would come in through Prop 56 is estimated to be $1 billion in just the first year alone. And with a federal match, that would be matched up to $2 billion. And so I think you know, when we look at the cost that taxpayers are paying when they're having to really pay for some of the tobacco-related diseases, this is really going to help bolster the program that many people in California are using, quite frankly. The other funding mechanisms, or the other things that Prop 56 will fund, are tobacco-related disease research. They will also do some education funding, or it will also fund education so that we can stop kids from smoking to begin with. So that's actually really big in terms of getting people to stop smoking or not even to start smoking. And the other thing is that there is also some funding for dental health. And so if folks know, you know, the main place that the tobacco is used is through your mouth, and lots of diseases that happen actually start from your mouth. So gum diseases, all cavities, they actually can start or permeate other diseases in your body. And when we look at Latino and African American kids, they are less likely to have seen a dentist in their life than some of their other peers that are in quite frankly, some of their white peers. And so this proposition would also fund dental care programs to make sure that kids actually have access to dental access. So that's Prop 56. We are saying yes on 56 because we want to make sure that we're bringing in more funding for healthcare, but not just that, so that we can see that smoking decreases and people don't actually start smoking, and we can save more lives. Thank you.
Thank you, Suzanne. Okay, and then finally we're going to bring up Dan Jacobson, who is with Environment California. He's going to talk about the plastic bag initiatives.
Thank you very much. It's a real pleasure for me to be here. I want to spend a little bit of time and talk about our environment, which we're all a part of, and we need a healthy environment if we're going to grow up healthy, have healthy kids, and pass this planet on to future generations. You might be wondering, well, what's the problem with plastics? But you probably see it every single day when you get up and you walk out of your house and you walk to the bus stop or you walk to the metro, and you see streets that are littered with every kind of single-use plastic that you can imagine, whether it's a straw or a cup. But millions and actually billions of single-use plastic bags are used in California every single year. And you might wonder, well, how many billion bags are used in California? And the answer would be, just in California alone, we use 13, and it's with a B, billion bags every single year. Now, if you assume the size of a bag is about 13, and I've done the math on this, so if you assume it's about 13 inches, so that's 26 inches worth of plastic film, 26 inches times 13 billion is about 338 billion inches. Well, that's a lot. You could go around the earth over 200 times with just the plastic bags that we're producing in California just in one single year. Studies from the Monterey Bay Aquarium and from other oceanography experts are saying that by 2050, we will have more plastic in the ocean than we have fish. So something is out of balance, and we have to be able to change it. There are a lot of environmental problems that we have in this world that are incredibly difficult to solve. This is not one of them. I would hazard a guess that every single person who is here and who is going to hear my voice and who lives in the state of California, who lives in the United States, probably in the world, knows what a reusable bag is and has used them. And if you talk to your grandparents and your parents, they have used them for years and years, because the plastic bag at your grocery store is actually a relatively new product that's been given away. It's only since about the late 1970s, early 1980s. And prior to that, your grandparents or your great-grandparents or your parents brought their own bags to the grocery store. So all that we're really saying is, let's return to our roots. And again, there have been so many studies about 1 in 3 leatherback turtles have plastic bags in their stomachs. dolphins, whales, sea otters are washing up on the shore because when they see the plastic bag in the ocean, especially to a turtle, it looks like a jellyfish. And for a turtle, that's their dinner. And so they'll eat 10, 20, 30 of these plastic bags. They get stuck in their stomach and they can't pass. 667 different kinds of animals in the ocean are impacted, with hundreds of thousands and millions every year of these animals dying. So it's time to do something. And in 2014, after 150 cities and counties, including the city and county of Los Angeles, banned single-use plastic bags, the legislature passed and the governor signed a bill to ban single-use plastic bags. We should be living in a bag-free state right now. But unfortunately, the out-of-state plastic bag manufacturers came in and have spent $6 million to put 2 questions on the ballot. They want to confuse voters, they want to make it difficult to figure out, but that's why I'm here today, to educate you and have you go tell your friends that the only initiative on the ballot this year that protects the environment is Prop 67. So people should vote yes on Prop 67 to keep the bag ban in California. And they should vote no on Prop 65 because it was just created by the plastic bag manufacturers. So it's a simple way to protect the environment, it's a simple solution to a huge problem, and it's a simple thing that you can do every single day to protect our oceans, to protect our sea turtles, and to protect the wildlife. So thank you very much.
All right, so we just heard from 4 amazing experts on these issue areas. So now's actually your opportunity to ask some questions. I wanted to say we have some organizers here. So we have folks from Scope, who came early, Communities for a Better Environment. Am I beautiful? Yeah. We heard about all the important ballot initiatives, and we want to know what your questions are. It's a rare opportunity for us to have experts on these issue areas. The elections are just around the corner. You all are going to be voting on some critical ballot measures. So what questions do you have? And feel free to just shout them out. It's an intimate conversation, so feel free to shout out whatever your questions might be.
Hi, I'm Daryl with Communities for a Better Environment. We're going to be walking, we just started our C4 program this year as well, and we're going to be walking on Proposition 55. And I think you gave a really good, quick overview. Can you just maybe do what are like the key points that have really, like, the first 2 sentences that really hit voters and be like, yes, I want to vote yes on that one. And can you also talk, I like what you said about this is not a tax. Do that.
Yeah, I would say that that's the most important fact that you can get out there, that this is not a tax increase. So if you can get that out there in your first 2 lines, you've done your job. I think the other thing you would say, voters want to know where their money's going. And so even if they're not the ones paying the tax, you should always include that it's funding education, right? K-12, music and arts programs were cut drastically during the recession. We're now just getting back to pre-recession levels, but we need 55. I think the one thing I say is if we lose 55 here locally in LAUSD, we lose $700 million right off the top. Right, so this idea of like lowering class sizes or providing wraparound services in schools, it's all, it would just, you wouldn't be able to do that. And just as a county, we lose $2.1 billion without 55. So if you could just get those numbers out there, then they could shock the system to some degree.
Great, thanks, Daryl. Okay, what other questions do y'all have? Does she have a question? Go ahead.
Mi pregunta es en la 56 del tabaco. A ver, si yo todo el tiempo pues yo tengo más de 40 años aquí en California. Y pues me hice ciudadana, soy ciudadana de este país. Quisiera que esto no fuera aprobado por el tabaco. Porque yo siempre camino en el camión. El gas es mi transportación.
I've been in California for more than 40 years, and about this issue with tobacco, I don't want it to be approved because I walk to the bus, and I'm a citizen of the United States. I walk into the bus.
Cuando estoy en el autobús, entran muchas personas jóvenes que no están enfermos y van oliendo a pura marihuana, pura droga, y todo eso le presenta a las personas que no fuman.
So when I get on the bus, there's a lot of young people who get on the bus that smell really bad. They smell like marijuana, they smell like drugs, and then that scent penetrates your clothes.
Y quisiera que esto pues le pusieran una estafa a eso, porque el gobierno mire las personas que realmente están enfermas y las personas que no están enfermas, porque dañan a las demás.
And I'd like for them to put an end to that because maybe they're not sick, but they make others sick.
Y
I'm gonna get clarification.
Yeah. So, le voy a dar la respuesta en inglés porque mi español no está muy bueno, pero so what I would say, yeah, I'll say it again. So actually, studies show when you increase taxes on tobacco, you actually will see less people actually use tobacco. And so I think that gets to the issue that you're talking about, is that, if we have more people, or if the tax goes up, then we'll see less and less people actually smoking, and that's what we want.
Me gustaría que eso pues el Estado quisiera que quitaran eso, o que vieran a ver cómo pueden arreglar este problema.
I would like for the state to see how we can fix this issue.
By voting yes, pero tenemos que votar sí.
Sí, ahí está el 8 temprano votando.
Sí,
Gracias.
Okay, any other questions out there? Any questions?
Porque todos voten por Hillary.
Okay. Alright. With that, I wanted to say thank you all for coming out this evening. It was a long trek out, especially for folks that came from outside of LA. Thank you so much to our speakers. And fighting that LA traffic and getting to this beautiful place. I would encourage you just to, because again, it is a rare opportunity to have experts in this field, and they did make their way all the way out here. If you do have additional questions that you don't want to ask in public, now's your time to just network with folks. And did you want to?
Can I add something, especially on all the ballot measures? So whether you're most passionate about 55 or 65 and 67 or 56 or 58, whatever it may be, or 62, 66. What we see every day, especially there's 19 days before the election in LA County, many places you can vote early already in person. If you're like me, I like to vote in person. I don't vote by mail, but voting early, make sure nothing gets in the way on election day for making sure my ballot's cast. But what I'll say is a lot of these measures really impact communities of color, not only Latinos and African Americans, but the API community, which is rapidly growing and diverse here in California. Many of those communities tell us they're supportive of a lot of the measures we talked about today, but they don't get information often from ballot campaigns. And people often find ballot measures confusing, where how it's written, they're likely to support, but then they're confused potentially about what the real impact is. And so we see a lot of drop-off amongst young people and people of color who go vote for president or something that they're really exercised about, and then they skip everything else.
And a lot of the things that are on the ballot, like 58, which is trying to correct something that was passed in 1998, like the death penalty, which came back into California through a ballot initiative, Prop 7. It's the whole reason, it's the way to repeal it is through the ballot initiative. So things like life and death are literally on the ballot. So for those of you who are activists and advocates, it's not enough for people that we work with to just turn out and vote. We really need to get them over to the ballot initiatives, and we really need them to vote from 51 to 67 and use the guide that organizations like SEHA have provided, or the Million Voters Project, or individual unions and organizations. There's a lot of resources available. So it's important when you're doing your get out the vote and educating voters that you educate them about the ballot measures. And if you're doing C3 work, you don't have to advocate it yes or no, but providing them information about those ballot measures is critical. So that's just my plug to do not ignore these important issues and any local measures that you have. So Hillary and others. That's what my nod.
That's a great closing. Thank you again to all of our speakers. Thank you. And finish. We have lots of food left over. Thank you.
I actually had a question for Proposition 58. That's the one. I just want to know, like, what type of new programs or initiatives would we take for someone to learning English an easy way? Because honestly, I feel like that is essential, and I guess in our society, because a lot of the access to good schools or to good business are mainly geared not to brag about us, but I've seen that in the United States they have a lot of access to big industry. So for example, my cousin, she comes from Mexico, and she's barely learning English, but the reason that she wants to really study English is because she wants to get into the acting field, and she feels that the companies, like the Spanish companies, more like the novelas and stuff like that, is a bit less than the industries that are here, which are big movies and all that. So that's why I'm asking what programs we should.
Right. So Prop 58, the language in Prop 58 is uniquely tied to what's called the LCAP process. And I don't know if you all think we're going to get into a lot of acronyms that sort of mean a lot of different things, but really don't mean anything in the end. Except that to say that our government here in California is moving into a direction that's talking about local control, meaning at an individual school site, at a district level, communities, students, parents, stakeholders get to determine what type of school they want, right? And so here in LAUSD, for instance, we recently started a school that is dual language with English and Armenian, right? Because the folks within that community decided that that's what the direction that they wanted to go in. So money is coming from the state and is given to the district, and folks at the ground level have the opportunity to sort of determine their own destiny at a school, at a particular school. So if you want, if you think that there's a particular program that will help or facilitate English, the learning of English, then you would come to the LCAP process and say, hey, this program should be part of my school, and the district will provide funding for that. What this really does, it doesn't necessarily tie any particular monies to language learning. What it does, it repeals laws that are in place right now that prevent us from doing multilingual education, right? So there's a long way we have to go before we get to a place where we're all multilingual and learning English efficiently and properly, but this is helping us repeal a lot of the racist structural sentiments that are part of the education system, so that we can get to that place. Right? So the fight is not over. Thank you.
Great, thank you everybody.